You talked about being a coach that helps people focus. What do you think is the biggest distraction that you see from athletes?
That's a great question. There are so many different answers depending on the individual. So I think a big part of it is now we live in this accelerated culture where most of us expect instant gratification. And it's
Hmm.
interesting. This isn't a pro or con about the transfer portal, but that's kind of symbolic of that. You've
Yeah.
got a lot of guys now that have played on three or four different teams. And that's not necessarily a judgment, but in the old days, you were on a team and you'd have to be on that team for 4 years or sit out a year. So, from a mental perspective, you kind of built or cultivated mental resilience. It was definitely a growth mindset. I don't see this in a lot of the guys that I work with, but it would seem that a lot of guys who play now, they don't get their way, they don't get their playing time. They make their mind up early that they're going to get in the portal and transfer early and go to another school. So I see that being sort of a distraction.
Hmm.
I also see a lot of players with people in their ears that get in their heads a lot. And I would want to think maybe I'm naive. Most of the time, it's well intentioned. It's people that care about them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, also sometimes it's people that also want a piece of them if they hit it big. So I think a lot of it is too. Social media is a big distraction. We're all on it. I mean, I get business from it. I know you do too. You get a lot of
Yeah.
followers from it. Um, Basically, we live in a world of distraction now. And
Hmm.
having the ability to sustain a level of focus is really a superpower. If you think about it, not many people can do that anymore. I think the
Yeah.
average American attention span, they say, is like 8 seconds now. So we can willfully sustain our attention on something for about 8 seconds most of the time before we can break thought. And in the year 2000, they say it was 12 seconds. So it's gone from 12 seconds in the year 2000 down to 8 seconds. I think they did the experiment or the research in 2015. So that attention span now is like this.
Hmm.
So it's unfortunate. It's good for guys like me that make a living teaching this stuff, obviously. I don't want to say it's good for business, but I guess it is.
Yeah. So you spoke about social media. Do you feel like that's probably the biggest factor in what has been a distraction factor? Like, do you think the social media age and the internet and everything is probably the biggest factor in the lack of attention span or the
Yeah.
decrease in it?
I don't know about biggest, but it's definitely a major contributing factor to it. I think it's probably hard to delineate what's the biggest, what's the smallest, like the percentage of it. But, I'll give you an example. Even for an older guy like me, I'm in my 50s, right? Greatest thing in the world to me is Uber Eats. My wife is out of town. I want to get something to eat. I get what I want, when I want it, immediately delivered to my doorstep. It's instant gratification. When I was a kid, not to sound like that old grandpops sitting on his front porch, like, get off my lawn. But when I was a kid, on TV, we had three stations, right? And that
Hmm.
was it. No cable TV. Kids now, that's a foreign concept. They can stream what they want, and I do it too. They can
Yeah.
stream what they want when they want it and watch it immediately. It's just the whole world has shifted. I don't think it's necessarily a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
Um, from a focus perspective, it might be a bad thing. Overall, though, I'm definitely not anti technology, but I do think it's a major contributing factor. I had a speaker come out. I do, when I'm in town, a weekly session for some students in Memphis, and she spoke about social media and being on our phones and sort of having more mindful usage of it. And she had us do an experiment where we took our phones and we looked at the screen time on our iPhones. I was horrified to see how much time I spend on my phone. And I lecture on this stuff and I teach this stuff and
Hmm.
work with athletes and high performers in the corporate world and academians. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, I battle with that too. But I try to take into account, am I being productive with my time on my phone?
Yeah.
So I might be on 10 hours, but 6 of those hours were Instagram, trying to DM people, or I'm posting content, learning, scrolling through content, trying to learn or something. So I try to take them into account, but I still think sometimes that it's still there's a negative to it. I'm not saying it's negative overall, but it's a negative to it because there's a level of distraction that comes with it. So I might be on my phone for, like you said, let's say 8 minutes straight, but the next 2 minutes I'm just, freelancing through whatever. And then, okay, I'm back focused now. But how much of that time is dedicated to actually being intentional, being focused? So I wrestle with how much of it is good and how much is it bad. But in your opinion, what do you feel like that balance is for like the average athlete? Do you think some of it
Yeah,
is
that's a great
okay?
question. That's a great question. I'm not really sure about that, but what I would say is if we're intentional about our usage, like it sounds like you're very intentional and you put thought into it. And for the most part, you go on, you do what you want, you maybe do a little bit of scrolling for fun or whatever, and then you get off. I think that's fine. Like,
Hmm.
I'm saying that, but this is my office. Like,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like all the coaches I work with, all these college and pro coaches and athletes, we do stuff over the phone. Any
Hmm.
business I get is through my phone, so I know it. But there's a difference between being intentional and mindful about it and using it for specific purposes or just scrolling to numb your emotions. Like a lot of people
Hmm.
just do that and it's a time suck and it's a waste of time. It's almost an emotional regulation thing. Instead of like feeling or thinking or reflecting or contemplating or doing something, if I don't want to do it, I can pick up my phone and get lost on Twitter or Instagram forever and look at things that I'm interested in, like basketball and soccer, whatever it is. Um, but I do think, just being mindful and think about it, like anything else in life, I think it's all in moderation, whatever that is, depends on the individual. But if it is inhibiting you or preventing you from doing something that you need to do, if it's affecting what you need to get done, then it's a problem.
Hmm.
You know,
I think that's the good differentiating factor, or the key piece to look at to say, I'm on here for 10 hours, but it's a productive 9.5, 10 hours versus just scrolling through TikTok and you done wasted half your day just,
Yeah, I
look.
mean, we can all get on TikTok and just look at girls and basketball stuff, right? We love that. But I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, what do we have for it, right? You're absolutely right. You know,
So another thing I think about when it comes to social media, which I'm impacted by it too. I recently just got back on social media because of this, but it's the comparison game. And so for athletes, you might see the rankings of this player across the country, and he's getting all the highlights. Like when Zion, when he was in high school, he was everywhere. So what can we do about that to where we're on it and we're being effective, but not being too impacted by the negative side of the comparison game?
that's a tough one if you think about it, because, I know you've heard that saying before that comparison is a thief of joy.
Hmm.
And especially on Instagram, it's hard. It's hard for
Yep.
guys that play or guys that coach because then they end up comparing themselves with others. It's hard, and we've all heard of females, males too, but primarily females with body image issues. They're looking at, photos of supermodels that were filtered or whatever. Um, it's difficult to do that. I just think a lot of times for that specific or those specific reasons, less is more. Like the less time you can spend on that, and again, being more intentional about what you want to do on it is the thing. It's interesting though. I've worked with kids. I say kids, college players who I've had close relationships to, and we have good communication. But then I see on Twitter maybe that they're in the transfer portal and something I didn't know. you know,
Mm.
like it
Yeah.
smacks you in so many different ways.
Hmm.
It can. But
So do
I've
you
found,
feel?
but I've established great relationships with people like you on it too. So it has a myriad of positive benefits as well. I've met some great people on it who do things similar to what I do, or we have similar interest, or we share resources and information like what you're doing now. So for all the perceived negatives, there's many perceived positives as well.
Yeah, that's something I've come to think about it with it too, because you hear so many times that social media is negative and all the technology and the new AI, everything is so negative, but nothing is inherently negative. For the most part, it's probably the human being using it being negative on there. Because, like you said, we're both on Instagram and whatever else. It's positivity being able to connect with somebody like you, but on the next scroll, it can be a very toxic and negative thing. So I think that we have to remember that social media is neither negative nor positive. It's just what we make of it. So
I
how can we?
agree. I
So
agree.
how can we do a better job of making it more of a positive environment for us?
I think it all starts with self awareness, just having that self awareness before you get on it. And, I'm big into mindfulness and meditation. I teach this kind of stuff. It's in the toolbox of the mental performance tools that I teach athletes and sort of high performers. But being self aware and thinking about what you want to do on it and what you don't want to do on it, and remind yourself from time to time.
Mm. So do you think that I'm even gonna ask that because I think about when I was a kid, I didn't have like a goal of what to do on social media. I was just on there to be on there like the average kid. But what could a kid do to say, this is my goal of social media, this is what I want to be on here for? Like how could they apply this?
Yeah, one of the things is to have what I was talking about, where you can gauge on your iPhone screen time. Look at how long you're on there every day, and if it's a copious amount of hours, ask yourself, could I be accomplishing other things that are important to me during that time? Do I often feel like I don't have enough time to get done with homework, my basketball training, everything that I have to do? And if the answer is yes, then look at the time on that, and you're going to have enough time. You can cut some of that out, because kids aren't like you and me
Mhm.
necessarily. They're not making a living on this. It's not really their livelihoods. Another thing is, it goes back to parenting too. Parents have to, they should monitor that somewhat as well. It's not really developmentally appropriate for kids with a developing brain to be on there all the time. There's all kinds of research and recommendations about how much you should and shouldn't be on it for different age. It varies from different age levels.
So how much would you put on the parents to monitor that? Like I know the kids have to take accountability for it, but how much would you say goes on the parent? I know they vary from age to age, but just a baseline idea of like,
A big amount. I don't know. It's hard to arbitrarily put a percentage on it, but I put a lot of the responsibility on the parents too. You know, just like they monitor how much their teenage child can drive the car, there's no difference. You know.
hmm. Look, let's be serious, man. Stop playing around. All right. You didn't got too comfortable. You didn't got relaxed. You forgot that you still got people behind you chasing you right now. You still got people to catch up to. You think just because you won a championship or you had a pretty good game last time that you can relax now. We ain't gonna write none of that stuff. Your goal right now is to look at how you were yesterday. Look at the player you were last night. Figure out how to be better than that person. Right now is you versus you. Your goal right now is to make progress in the person that you were last night, the person that you were yesterday. Be the person this week should be the person from last week. The person this month should be the person from last month. On the court and off the court. Personal development too. So right now, progress is the only goal. We ain't worried about what other people got going on. Focus on progress. It's you versus you. It's me versus me. So that right there is your mission. That's your goal. I don't care about who say the best in state is. Who I don't care about any of that. Your goal right now is to be better than you were yesterday. I don't care if you struggling to make the team. I don't care if you the last player they're looking at to make the team. We ain't worried about none of that. Your goal right now is to be better than you were yesterday. I don't care if you're the number one player in the nation. Could care less. Your goal right now is to be better than you were yesterday. So go ahead and get you one of these because you need that reminder because you got too comfortable. That's the issue. You got too comfortable. This can't get you comfortable right here. So go ahead, get you a reminder, get you like a flag hanging as a reminder to say progress is on the goal.